Boy, that brings back memories. As the man says, I am a guitarist, and I've earned my living that way for almost 20 years. If anyone had told me when I started that I'd still be doing the same thing now, I wouldn't have believed them. This opening music is Peacock, a record I made as a member of the Krew Cats 15 years ago. I've seen the rise of Duane Eddy, the Shadows, the Beatles, the Stones, Clapton, Beck, Page, Hendrix, and many more. I've heard twangy guitars, fuzz, feedback, wah-wah, and played them all myself at one time or another on more records than I care to remember. Boy, I've been through many guitars since those days, since a record that first turned me on to the sound of the electric guitar.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on, join me home. We'll have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. When the clock strikes 2, 3 and 4, if the band slows down, we'll yell for more. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
As far as I'm concerned, that's where it all started. After hearing Franny Beecher play that short solo on Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock. Straight after that, I went out and bought my first guitar. It cost me £1 in a pawn shop. I taught myself from records and the radio. It was the start of the skiffle era in England, and like a lot of other budding young guitarists, I didn't find it too hard to strum along with Lonnie Donegan. His guitarist, Denny Wright, who also played with Johnny Duncan's Bluegrass Boys, was one of my real early influences. Oh, that's sophisticated skiffle. In our days when we were kids, we used to sit with a guitar and strum along a few chords. I think Don't You Rock Me Daddy-O had probably 3 chords in it, and we knew 2 of them. By this time, I traded my first guitar, a simple round-hole acoustic, for a cello Framers, which I fitted with a pickup. I used to play it through my granddaddy's radio. Then I graduated to a Framers Black Rose and joined Marty Wilde and his Wildcats. When I joined Marty, he presented me with my first ever solid electric guitar. It was a Gibson Les Paul Custom, and he bought it from a gospel singer called Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Of course, electric guitars were around long before rock music. Guitarists had been amplifying their instruments for years in order to make themselves heard. But within rock music, the electric guitar became much more than just a loud acoustic. Over 20 years that had followed the explosive solo on Rock Around the Clock, rock and a guitar have developed side by side, so closely that their evolution is inseparable. The first slim, solid guitars that will always be associated with rock had themselves appeared in the 40s, giving the instrument a greater range of volume and tone and altering its basic sound by picking up reverberations of the strings instead of the resonance of the sound box. Further sophistications that quickly followed the advent of the solid guitar allowed faster, smoother action, access to a greater range of notes, and more variations in sound. Alongside the development of the guitar came the development of the recording equipment. One of the pioneers of this was a man called Les Paul, who many of you have heard of. He developed the Les Paul guitar. He was one of the first men in recording to have a multi-track machine. He used to put one guitar down, then another, and have many guitars, one on the top of the other. And this was one of his earliest recordings. My first experience of recording was with Marty Wilde. As we toured the country in the late 50s, particularly when we played American basses, my knowledge of music broadened and I got to know records by a variety of American guitarists and learned to distinguish their individual styles and sounds and their different guitars. This was the first great generation of rock guitar players. Franny Beecher played a Gibson, so did Presley's guitarist, the legendary Scotty Moore. After a while, I had his style off almost note for note. This is me on Marty's version of Presley's Blue Moon of Kentucky.
Well, it was on one moonlight night, the stars shine bright, way from high, let's say goodbye. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gonna let me blue. I'm going.
In those days as a kid, I thought that was a really good copy. But here's the real thing.
Well, the heat was on one moonlight night, stars shining bright, way from high, let's say goodbye. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gonna let me blue.
Scotty Moore with Elvis Presley. That's great. His style was so simple and straightforward. He developed into rock music the style of Chet Atkins, who was purely a country and western player. Chet used to play rhythm with his thumb and melody with the first finger. Scotty used to do two things different to Chet. He used to play the rhythm with his thumb, okay, but he used to play all sorts of other rhythms as well as melodies with his fingers. And the two combined went together to make what you just heard on that record. Another great guitarist around that era was Eddie Cochran. And when Eddie came over here to England, we backed him on his tours. And I remember waiting for him in the rehearsal studio. And I was sitting there playing some Scotty Moore stuff, you know. And Eddie came in, sat down, plugged in his amp, plugged in the guitar, and sat down and played Birth of the Blues. And he taught me how to play it. And that was my first influence of real American guitarists showing us young kids what to do. Eddie was one of the few guitarists that I'd ever heard in those days who was really blues influenced. Have a listen to 20 Flight Rock.
Ooh, well, I gotta get with a record machine when it comes to rockin', she's a queen. We love to dance on a Saturday night, all alone where I can hold her tight, but she lives on the 20th floor uptown. The elevator's broken down, so I walk 1, 2, 5, 3, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, flight 8, flight more. Upon the 12th, I'm starting to drag. 50 before I'm ready to sag. Get to the top, I'm too tired to rock.
I don't suppose Eddie's blues influences show so much on his recordings as when we were just sitting around jamming together and he was teaching us kids how to play. On the other hand, James Burton, Ricky Nelson's guitarist, was a country guitar player. Country differed from blues in many ways, as probably everybody knows. James Burton used a Fender Telecaster. It was the first solid body guitar ever made, and also most popular. It was introduced by Leo Fender in 1948 as the Broadcaster, and apart from its change of name a year later, it remained virtually unaltered in more than 25 years.
Well, sometimes I think you're kissing, oh, just a little too much. You drive me crazy, baby, with your magic touch. You make me feel so good when the moon is shining bright, with our lips together, and you're squeezing me so tight. Well, I went steady once before, thought I loved the girl next door. She stepped out on me, she couldn't be true. But I got over all my dreams, time went by so fast it seems. Now I know I'll never get over you. All right.
James Burton with Ricky Nelson on A Little Too Much. James Burton had a great sound. It was very individual. He got it mostly by having a very low action on the guitar so that the strings hit the board and the frets at the same time. He also had a very unusual style. He used to bend one note into another. While one was sustaining, the other was bending down and holding on. So he used to get a really exciting sound. He also used to play, instead of with a thumb pick in his fingers, he used to play with a pick and his fingers, holding a pick in between the first finger and the thumb and playing with the other two fingers. And that's how he got his sound with the Fender Telecaster. It was another Fender, the Stratocaster, that became the most distinctive electric guitar. Certainly its shape made it the most easily recognizable, and with its deeply cut-away body formed with twin horns. This was a guitar that Buddy Holly played.
If you knew Peggy Sue, then you know why I feel blue without Peggy. My Peggy Sue. Oh, well, I love you, galleys. I love you, Peggy Sue. I love you, Peggy Sue, with a love so rare and true. Oh, Peggy, my Peggy Sue. Well, I love you, gal. I want you, Peggy Sue.
Buddy Holly's Peggy Sue. His own unique style was a combination of blues and country. Also, because he started playing in a trio where he had to play lead and rhythm, he developed a style known as chord lead, using chords to play solos on his own Stratocaster. Another guitarist who used a Strat was Cliff Gallup in Gene Vincent's Blue Caps. Though less widely remembered than some of his contemporaries, his style had matchless excitement.
The race was won. Here come the devil doing 100 more. I'm a riding old man. I'm a riding old man. I'm a riding old man down the line. Let's play it again.
Race with the Devil, Gene Vincent, and Cliff Gallup. Unlike the other guitarists, Cliff Gallup had a combination of country and jazz. He used the same guitar as Buddy Holly, Stratocaster. Same guitar, different sound, different style. In England, we listened to these guitarists and we learned. However, in spite of our enthusiasm and of the audiences who came to see us on our first tours, there were problems no one could ever have dreamed of. Some of the halls we played just didn't know what it was all about. We'd find there were no plugs for our amplifiers, and sometimes we'd go to plug in and it would be a DC current instead of AC current, and our amps would go up in smoulders of white smoke. Earlier studio sessions were a bit primitive too. The equipment and the people operating it allowed no scope for playing around with the sound. Not until Joe Meek did anyone in this country begin to realize the potential for creating different effects in the studio. Occasionally, though, someone did come up with a genuinely exciting sound.
Come on, pretty baby, let's move it and a groove it. Baby, shake, oh baby, shake, oh honey, please don't lose it. The rhythm that gets into your heart and soul. Let me tell you, baby, it's called rock and roll. They say it's gonna die, but honey, please let's face it. Well, they just don't know what's going to replace it. Everybody's calypsos, I've got nothing on. Real country music that just drives along. My head above it.
What was so important about Move It, apart from it being Cliff Richard's first hit, was its amazing sound. It had a harshness we'd only heard before on American records. I remember Marty saying he thought it was an American record. The guitarist was a regular session player, an old buddy of mine, Ernie Shear.
At that time, I mean, all the session guys were back in the pop idols of those times. I don't know if it was because the kids weren't adequate players then, but it was all session guys that were accompanying these idols. I was on the session with Cliff Richards when they wanted to do the number Move It, and we did the guitar intro. It was like an open sound. It all stems light from the skiffle in the open keys, E and A and everything. You were told by the A&R man the style that they wanted. You'll find generally that a lot of these things are never written. They usually give you the chord sequence with the chord symbols, and they leave it up to the guy that's doing the session. And that's why, if they know a guitar player or some sort of player on any instrument plays in the style that they want, that's why they book them. In the early days, the guitar was really a part of the rhythm section, because I played in Glasgow with all the dance bands, and I never played any solos whatsoever. I just played rhythm, like the Freddie Green stuff, you know, with Basie. That's all that was required of the instrument.
But as Ernie reminds us, things have changed a little bit since then.
In the 50s and that, when they started writing for electric guitar, they wrote phrases with piano like George Shearing. That was guitar, piano, and vibe sound, which has stuck for many years. And that went on, and then they brought the tenor in, playing in unison with the guitar and all the rest of it. Same thing. But then the groups came along, and the guitar went on its own. The guitar really went on its own. And it put the guitar on the map. And that is the difference today to many years ago, to when the guitar was just playing rhythm in a section, and if the band was cut down, the first one to go was a guitar. But now it's come round to this, where the guitar, I would think, is the last thing to go.
In fact, the guitarist who was to become so closely associated with Cliff Richard's career, the Shadows' Hank Marvin, was an accomplished guitarist. His black-rimmed glasses and Stratocaster a la Buddy Holly became the model for countless young guitarists, as the Shadows led the boom in instrumentals in Britain at the start of the 60s. The man who started the boom was the American guitarist Duane Eddy. I remember when I first heard that record, all us guitarists, we used to think, oh, he's tuning the string down and bringing it back up again and have machine heads. And that's what we used to do. But later on, I took the instrumental up in key, a semitone on the guitar, so I could bend it with my finger. But we soon found out that there was a contraption on Duane Eddy's guitar called a Bigsby tremolo arm. This allowed the man to take the strings down or up a semitone just whenever he wanted to. Here's Duane Eddy himself.
Well, a man named Bigsby invented it, and it was just to give a vibrato to the guitar. And Chet Atkins had used it on several of his records, and this was the Gretsch that I have, is the Chet Atkins model. Just happened to be the best guitar for what I needed at the time, which was playing with country groups. I tried several, and it had the best neck on it, and which felt the best to me. And so I bought it. I didn't want to make a Chet Atkins record, you know. I wanted to do it my own way.
But the sound was more than simply Duane's idea. Right from the start, Eddie's producer, Lee Hazlewood, had a definite concept of the sound he wanted.
The sound came from a piano player named Eddie Duchin. You remember Eddie Duchin with his one-fingered low piano playing? And I loved that so much because it was very simple and a little bit stupid, I think, in a way. But people loved it. And I thought, my God, you know, that's the kind of guitar I play. You know, you have time to hunt the next note, and I don't play much guitar. And so I wanted somebody to play guitar like Eddie Duchin played piano. And I chose, for about a year, I worked with a guy named Al Casey, a very successful sideman in Los Angeles now. My God, he's probably richer than all of us. And we made records with Al, and they were fantastic Duane Eddy records. But the only thing is, Al could do it so easy in the beginning. And Duane, who was my babysitter in those days, a combination babysitter and rhythm guitar player on all the sessions, it was difficult for Duane to do it then, because Duane played dum-chung, Chet Atkins style of guitar playing in those days. And to change him over, it was very difficult for him. So when he played, everything must be right on the beat, very very on the beat. And consequently, when we made the first record with Duane, it was a chart record, and 20 after it, 20 that followed after it were all chart records. Rouser. As well as Duane Eddy, there were, of course, other American instrumentalists, notably the Ventures and Link Wray, whose classic rumble inspired later guitarists like Pete Townshend. When the record was released in 1958, it went unnoticed in Britain, but its menacing tones sold millions in America. Link Wray.
That's where I learned all my rhythmic chords, you know, and progressions from jazz, but I never gotten any really far-out leads, you know, until I really got into country music and listened to George Barnes and Grady Martin and Chet Atkins and those guys, you know. And that's where I really started doing my lead work from. And that's sort of like the way I started off. And then I bought me a Vega guitar, which had the pickup built in the guitar, but it was still acoustic guitar. And that was my first electric guitar. I bought that in 1949. And I played that until the Les Paul Gibsons came out. And I bought the 1950 Les Paul Gibson, the first one. But it had the bridge over it, so you couldn't put your hand down on the bridge, you know, like at the time, deadening it out the strings with this hand, with your right hand, was the thing back in those days, you know, playing the Chet Atkins note, you know. But you couldn't do it with the first Les Paul Gibson. So I wrote Gibson a letter and told him I was having problems you know, because I couldn't muffle the strings. They didn't understand what I meant muffling the string. They, you know, and they wrote me a few letters back, and I sent them a little rough diagram. And the next thing I knew, in 1951 or 52, the Les Paul Gibson came out without the bar across. And then I bought that, and that's, I had that until 1964, and it got ripped off, you know. But that's what I made Rumble with. In 1955, I broke down with double pneumonia. Went to the government hospital, found I had tuberculosis, you know, and I was in hospital. I had a lung taken out, and I couldn't sing anymore. I couldn't do any of this, so I had to revert to my guitar. But that's not what I wanted to do, so I just kept on, and I'm sort of like, I don't know, Out of a Blue Sky, Rumble came out, you know, at the record hop. I was doing a record hop in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I got into this sound, you know, and the kids, and it came from the kids first. They kept up and kept saying, you know, play me that song again, because they wanted to hear it, because it was different than what the rock scene and those days were, you know. And they kept asking for it, so that's when I found the fuzz sound, you know. I punched holes in my speakers, you know, tweeters. I had a Premier amplifier with they had the vibrato on, you know, the tremolo, you know. And that was the first amplifier that came out with that. And it was the amplifier that had a 12-inch bottom speaker and 2 8-inch tweeters with crossover heads, you know, and that didn't come out till later on, like early 60s, right? But instrumentals don't last, because you can't talk with a guitar. You can't say I love you with a guitar. You know what I mean? You can't say I hate you with a guitar. You can only make sounds with it, right? And that's what I was frustrated with myself because I couldn't sing, you know, and everything I had, I wanted to put vocal-wise and singing-wise, you know, I put it all on my guitar.
Amazing, Link Wray's Rumble. It may have sold millions in America, but in this country, instrumentals meant the Shadows. They had an unbroken string of 12 top 10 hits between 1960 and 63, including 5 number ones. The characteristic sound of the Shadows records was produced by Hank Marvin's use of the tremolo arm, which was fitted as standard to the Stratocaster until 1960. The Stratocaster tremolo sound differed from that of the Bigsby arm on Duane Eddy's Gretsch, but comparisons were inevitable. Here's Hank Marvin.
I think it's quite obvious, listening to any of the Shadows records, the early Shadows records, and then playing a Duane Eddy album or his singles, that the approach was different. If you compare, say, Apache with Rebel Rouser, for instance, I think the style of music was different. Duane was using this sort of heavy sort of 2-beat sort of thing on a lot of his music, with saxophones and piano. Of course, we just had the quartet sound, using primarily acoustic guitar as a rhythm feature, like a country group, which I think gave it a different feel altogether from Duane's. I think there was a certain amount of influence from Duane's record. There must have been, because he, after all, was the big thing in instrumental records when we started. Another thing was Duane's approach was using the bass strings on the guitar, which sounded to me like they were tuned down. Now we tended to, or myself, as I was playing the lead instrument, tended to favor the higher register on the guitar, usually. And Jack Good commented on this once at the start of 1961 or something. He said, "What's new this year? Duane Eddy's still low and twangy, and the Shadows are still high and twangy."
The Shadows' popularity waned, along with that of many established artists, with the rise of northern groups and the R&B movement in Britain. And by the mid-60s, the music was dominated by groups like the Beatles and the Stones, shifting the emphasis away from purely instrumental sound. Within these groups was a new generation of guitarists with new influences, those of Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and American bluesmen like B.B. King, Buddy Guy, and Muddy Waters. A handful of guitarists serving their apprenticeship in these groups were to raise the status of rock guitar to an all-time peak and create a new idol in popular music, the guitar hero. Three emerged from the same group called the Yardbirds, though the first, the prototype guitar god, Eric Clapton, left the group in '65 before his powers had fully developed. With John Mayall's Bluesbreakers, he grew from a blues copyist into a player of fluidity, strength, and originality. Clapton with John Mayall's Bluesbreakers, double-crossing time, demonstrating the finger vibrato. He gets this by bending the string, holding it there, and to sustain the note, he just rolls his fingers backwards and forwards like a violinist. Later, with Cream, Clapton developed the art of improvising in a way that had never previously been attempted in rock, constructing extended solos in a constantly stimulating trio framework, bouncing ideas off Jack Bruce's bass and Ginger Baker's drums. Crossroads from Cream, featuring Eric Clapton, his replacement in the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck, was one of the first to introduce Eastern influences and to experiment with electronic sounds. Over, under, sideways, down, the Yardbirds with Jeff Beck. Jeff had a great style. He developed the style with echoes and feedback from the guitar. He used a lot of Clapton's influences in the finger vibrato, and he also brought into use the style of the sitar on guitar. Jimmy Page, who also played with the Yardbirds, already had considerable experience as a session man before he joined the group. And although acknowledged as a guitar virtuoso, he didn't display his full potential until later, when he formed his own band, Led Zeppelin.
This thing about the guitar virtuoso, I've played down to keep the group image even closer together so that everybody's part comes through far more. I don't think one has to keep proving that all the time. I think it's far more constructive to put all your energies into getting more material together than just sort of showing off every night. Everybody in the group has a spot where they shine forth. I've been doing Dazed and Confused. I guess that's probably a little showpiece in itself. It's the thing that has all the bowing and lots of extensions, and it's always changing. It's the sort of thing that you can just go off in any direction each night, and everybody seems to be so close together in the group that they just go off with you, and it's great fun to do a number like that.
Been dazed and confused for so long, it's not true. Wanted a woman, never bargained for you. Lots of people talking, few of them know. Soul of a woman was created below.
When I was doing sessions, I've been playing with a violin bow across the strings, which I guess that's become a bit of a trademark now. But that wasn't actually my idea. It was suggested to me by one of the violinists in the strings section. It obviously looks gimmicky because one hasn't seen it done before, and as soon as you pick up a bow and start playing a guitar with it, that's the first thing people are going to say, well, that's an interesting gimmick. But the fact is that it is very musical. It sounds like an orchestra at times, the cello section, the violins. It's quite amazing.
Led Zeppelin's Dazed and Confused, featuring Jimmy Page. Although The Who's Pete Townshend was less gifted technically, any shortcomings were more than compensated by an originality, a ferocious aggression, and an urge to experiment which ignored all the rules. Townshend packed everything he'd learned into the short instrumental break in their second single, Anyway, Anyhow, Anywhere. Townshend and The Who. Pete Townshend had an incredible style. He didn't get around the fingerboard too well, but he used to use the guitar. He'd use the knobs on the guitar. He'd use the pickup controls. He'd use the strings by scraping the plectrum along the strings and making a real scraping sound. It was a really good style. He used to use a lot of chords, and in the chords he used to turn around to the amplifier and it'd feed back through the guitar to the amplifier, making a hell of a noise. He also used to get through a hell of a lot of guitars. He'd put that guitar on the floor and jump on it and smash it. Curiously, since almost all their influences were American, the guitar heroes were British. Even the one exception, Jimi Hendrix, was so closely associated with this country that he polled votes in the British section of the pop polls. The career of Jimi Hendrix marked the pinnacle, to me, of the electric guitar.
Hey, Joe, where you going with that gun of yours? Hey, Joe, I said, where you going with that gun in your hand? I'm going down to shoot my old lady. You know, I caught her messing around with another man. Yeah. I'm going down to shoot my old lady. You know, I caught her messing around with another man. And that ain't too cool. Hey,
Jimi Hendrix and Hey Joe. Jimi Hendrix was, I think, the epitome of heavy rock guitar. He used the guitar in all ways, musically and electronically. His phrasing was marvelous, the way he laid back on the beat. He was also left-handed. Whether this makes any difference or not, I don't know. And if you, like me, are fascinated by Jimi Hendrix, then watch out for one of the later programs in this series, which will be devoted to his music. There'll also be one about Eric Clapton. The innovations of these guitarists made the public fully aware of the vast scope of the electric guitar. Within the guitarist's control, in the way he held the strings, struck them, or adjusted the controls on the guitar, amplifier and the foot pedal, was a universe of sound. The basic guitar might sound like this. But the same instrument, coupled with an octave divider, might sound like this. And then coupled with a wah-wah, it might sound like this. Then coupled with a phasing unit, it sounds like this. When coupled with a frequency analyzer, which gives the effect of another note being played alongside what you're actually playing, it sounds like this. Now coupled with the Echoplex, the guitar sounds like this. And lastly, the most common device of all, this is the fuzz box. Thousands of watts of amplification. The amp I used in the Wildcats, which seemed quite loud enough at the time, only had 30 watts output. Most of the groups at that time used the Vox AC30. The steady increase in volume resulted partly from playing in bigger auditoriums. Here's Richie Blackmore, once a session player like myself, who with Deep Purple unleashed more decibels than most.
I do not think that Deep Purple became known to the public through sheer volume. That was just an easy target for the press to criticize, who did not like the band. I did notice that we were considered to be the loudest band in existence, according to the Guinness Book of Records, but that depends on how big the hall is where you were playing at the time. We played no louder than most of the other so-called big groups. It depends also on the PA and who is operating it at the time, apart from the fact I'm hard of hearing anyway. Maybe dramatic is my style. I love dramatic music. Bach, Hendrix, Holst, Wally Roundhead, and so on. I'm just expressing my feelings at the time of playing like any other musician. My style developed through sheer practice. When I was attending school, I was constantly practicing mentally. Then I would rush home and practice to the late hours. My first influence, believe it or not, was Tommy Steele. I saw Tommy Steele jumping about with a guitar around his neck, and I thought, that's what I wanted to do. And then I found out more about guitarists and started to emulate certain guitarists. I think the first one was Hank Marvin of the Shadows. I used to play Apache, and then I heard about this guitarist that was living in the Hounslow area, and his name was Jimmy Sullivan. When I saw Jim, I thought it's either a case of giving up or trying to compete. I think one of the greatest solo guitar instrumentals I've ever heard was Peak Hour, of which Jim played the lead, which I still haven't got off yet because I've lost the record. Playing rock is most definitely a challenge because of the limitations involved, such as the chord structures and timings, and of course the excitement and the feeling of power on the stage, plus the money.
Having explored the limits of volume, the guitarists of the 70s have frequently opted for an altogether more subtle and eclectic approach. Like Richie Blackmore himself, they borrow from classical sources, learn from the music of the East and the West, and absorb the influence of jazz. Whereas two guitars, bass and drums could once make as much noise as an orchestra, they're now able to make as much music. There are guitarists like John McLaughlin and Larry Coryell who can play in any style, sometimes simultaneously. If Scotty Moore, James Burton and their contemporaries represent the first generation of rock guitarists, and Clapton, Beck, Page and Hendrix the second, there's now a generation who've learned from them both. Here's Joe Walsh, now rated as America's top guitarist.
My early influences were kind of strange for guitar players. Most guitar players that I read about went back and studied the old blues guys. I became aware of that much later. Actually, the first influences for me were the first generation and second generation of guitar players. I was very aware of James Burton with Ricky Nelson's group, and of course my whole growing up period through high school and junior high school, as we call it, was just listening to all the old American, the golden oldies, rock and roll. When I actually started seriously studying lead guitar was when the first line of English guitar players came out. Beck, Page, Clapton. I think those were the three major ones, all out of the Yardbirds. At that point, I really got into, well, how do these guys do that stuff, you know? I saw the transitions that had been made, and that right there just woke me up, and I thought, well, let me get into this English stuff and make that my background and take that a step further, you know? And that probably accounts for me being just a little different or whatever I am.
Joe Walsh's Turn to Stone. One of the specific developments Joe Walsh has been associated with is the voice box, or the bag.
What it is, instead of a speaker cabinet with speakers in it, which would be very loud, you get a small speaker or a driver. Driver, I mean the little knob on the back of a high-frequency horn. They have them in PAs and in stereos. And you use that as your speaker. So you connect your amp top directly to that instead of a speaker. In a high-frequency driver, there's a little threaded part that you would screw onto a horn. But I took rubber tubing and glue or epoxy or tape or some mud or whatever, and somehow get it to stick on there so that the sound comes from your amp top into this driver and up the tube. And then you put the tube in your mouth and you modulate. In other words, you don't talk, you don't make any sound. That supplies the sound, and you move your mouth accordingly. So you have your guitar being modulated by your mouth. It's not loud at all. You have to take that coming out of your mouth and mic it through a PA system or into a board onto tape. The middle solo of Rocky Mountain Way was the one that I'm known for, you know, using the bag. It's a great effect.
Another guitarist who has emerged as a major figure in the 70s is Ron Wood of the Faces, who remembers Eric Clapton's early days.
I used to go and see him at the Crawdaddy in Richmond, and we ended up getting quite pally, and we used to sort of swap licks, but he was a few years up on me, and he turned me on to people like Freddie King, and I went on to Albert King, and Jimi Hendrix turned me on to B.B. King. One side of B.B. King that I really missed was the very obscure recordings, you know, which he gave me a few of his old albums that are deleted these days. It was their earthy feel, you know, it made it, you first got the feeling that they were strangling their neck on the guitar when they really got emotion through their arm, down through the fingers, and right out through the amp. And Albert King still has a bit of that these days. I say that because I was listening to Albert King recently, and his favourite of mine is Cold Feet. He does in that song all what I like to hear from him, you know. Duane also had a big influence on Eric Clapton, and I found out just how big the influence was when the Rainbow concerts came up, you know. when it came to working in depth on the songs that Eric had recorded, I found myself having to play the part that he had played in that setup, you know. It was a funny turn of events, really. Playing the role of someone that had turned me on to the slide in the first place.
That was Ron Wood taking the late Duane Allman's part on Little Wing, first recorded by Clapton, with Duane Allman on slide guitar for Derek and the Dominoes' Layla sessions. Here's Clapton and Allman himself duetting on the best known of all the tracks they recorded together. Layla from Derek and the Dominoes. Rock is now accepted as music, which it certainly wasn't when I started. We've gone a long way beyond the 12-bar structures and 3-chord progressions of the 50s into something as complex and as intelligent as any other form of music. The next generation will be able to learn even more from their predecessors, and one guitarist will be able to master the techniques of a dozen earlier players. Yet, however great their knowledge and however sophisticated their style, they'll be hard put to improve on the explosive brilliance of those gems from the very birth of rock.
Race with the Devil from Gene Vincent ends Insight for this week. It was introduced by Big Jim Sullivan, written by John Pidgeon, and produced by Tim Blackmore.